You seriously think you can bring this beast online, old-timer? The voice belonged to a young corporal named Evans, full of that arrogant, confident tone only someone fresh out of training could pull off. He stood with his arms crossed, smirking as he looked down at the old man. Richard Mororo, 85, in a plain visitor's jacket, didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the silent, massive machines of the carrier's engine room. His hand brushed the cold steel railing, almost like he was greeting an old friend. Around them, junior sailors and Marines exchanged quiet glances and smirks. They found it hilarious. To them, this old man couldn't possibly do anything to save the ship. The silence from the command deck made everything feel heavier. The USS Gerald R. the Navy's newest supercarrier, was dead in the water. A sudden power failure had thrown the entire ship into darkness. All digital systems had failed. The reactors were stable, but cold. Every automated backup plan had failed. Officers and crew were frozen in panic. The pride of the fleet, the fastest and most advanced ship in the world, had stopped moving like a machine that forgot how to breathe. Captain Riggs, the commanding officer, had no other option. He had called in a civilian, a guest touring the ship with his grandson, because of a rumor. Richard Moraro had once served on the first nuclear carrier, the USS Enterprise. His grandson, Ensign Miller, had nervously suggested that his grandfather might know the old manual systems, the ones nobody used anymore. And now here he was, small, stooped, quiet. To the crew, he looked more like a confused visitor than the person who could save them. Lieutenant Commander Shaw, chief engineer, pinched the bridge of his nose. His face was drawn with stress. 12 hours of crisis had worn him down. To him, Moraro was a distraction. To Evans, he was a punching bag for his frustration. "With all due respect, sir," Evans said loud enough for the entire room to hear, "this is a fifth-generation A1B reactor, not some old steam engine. What's he gonna do? Hit it with a wrench?" A ripple of laughter ran through the room. Moraro didn't respond. He walked slowly, deliberately. His eyes scanned the banks of dead consoles and dormant turbines. Emergency lights cast long, flickering shadows, making the enormous engines look like sleeping steel giants. The air smelled of cold metal and old oil. He moved calmly, while the rest of the crew shifted nervously. "I need a paper schematic," Moraro said quietly, but every word carried authority. "I need to see the secondary coolant pumps and emergency induction valves." Shaw rubbed his forehead harder. "Sir, all our schematics are digital. The system is down." "There's always a paper copy," Moraro said calmly. "Lid line locker in the engineering control center. There has to be one." No one had checked for paper schematics in 20 years. While a petty officer reluctantly went to look, Moraro continued his slow walk, hand brushing against thick, insulated cables. His fingers traced the lines like reading Braille. He stopped at a section of steel deck. His foot tapped along a seam. "Get me a pry bar. There's a manual valve panel under this plate." Evans laughed, loud and sharp. "A what? This is solid steel. You're not going to find a secret hatch from some old spy movie." Moraro looked at him, calm, steady. Evans's laughter died. His smirk faltered. There was something in those blue eyes, something quiet, powerful, and unsettling. Ensign Miller, standing at the edge of the room, felt his face heat up. He had suggested his grandfather might help, but seeing the crew's disrespect made him nervous and angry at the same time. He saw the skill in Moraro's eyes, the confidence born of experience, but everyone else only saw an old man. A sailor returned with a heavy pry bar. Moraro took it without hesitation. The crew watched as he slid the bar into the seam, levering it slowly. The steel groaned, strained, and finally a section of the deck lifted. Beneath it lay large, grease-covered manual valves, their red handles thick with decades of dust. Evans stared, his mouth slightly open. "No way," he whispered. "They never get rid of the basics," Moraro said softly, more to himself than anyone else. He knelt, old knees protesting, studying the valves. He asked for a wrench, a pressure gauge, and a direct line phone. Each request only deepened the disbelief around him. This was not in any manual. This was instinct, memory, experience. He began methodically checking each valve. Slowly, Deliberately, he turned them, checked the gauges, listened to the hissing pipes. Evans's disbelief shifted back to fear. "Hey guys, get a picture for the museum," he whispered. "World War vet tries to fix a spaceship." The command deck crackled. Captain Riggs's voice came over the emergency intercom. "Engineering status report. The fleet admiral is on his way. I need something, Shaw. Anything." The mention of the admiral made the room colder. Time was running out. Moraro took a large red-handled valve in his hands. His fingers, spotted with age, moved with the certainty of someone who had done this 1,000 times. The engine room seemed to fade. He was no longer 85. He was 20 again, on the USS Enterprise, surrounded by screaming alarms and boiling steam. Red lights flashed. High-pitched whines pierced the air. He was sweating, dirty, heart racing. "It's not enough, Rick! She's going critical!" someone shouted. Steam hissed, pipes shook, and the floor vibrated beneath him. But he knew the machines, he knew how far the valves could go. He remembered every manual bypass, every emergency procedure that was never written down. The memory ended. He was back in the quiet, frozen engine room of the Ford. His face was calm, but the fire in his mind was alive. He knew these machines not from reading, but from surviving their ancestors. His hands remembered. Ensign Miller could no longer hold back. He had watched the crew mock his grandfather. He saw the chief engineer and others treat him like a fool. Evans had even joked, "Careful you don't break a hip, Pops." Enough was enough. Miller stepped into the shadows, pulled out his phone, and dialed the number his grandfather had given him for emergencies. "Admiral Thompson's office," came the crisp voice on the second ring. Miller's voice was low, steady. "This is Ensign Miller on the Gerald R. Ford. My grandfather, Richard Moraro, is in the engine room. They're treating him like a joke. Sir, he served under you on the Enterprise." There was a pause. Then the voice returned, sharp and serious. "Stay right there, Ensign. Don't let him leave. The Admiral is on his way." Miller felt relief. Justice finally was moving. The old man continued to work, surrounded by fools unaware that the wheels of reckoning had started to turn. The engine room smelled of metal, oil, and ozone. The lights flickered as Moraro moved from valve to valve. Each turn of his wrench, each tap of a gauge was deliberate. He didn't rush. He didn't panic. The old man seemed to know exactly what the machines needed. Corporal Evans paced, arms still crossed, eyes darting nervously. "This is insane," he muttered. "Who just starts rerouting power on a billion-dollar ship without permission?" Shaw, the chief engineer, hovered nearby, torn between authority and confusion. "Sir, maybe we should wait for—" Moraro shook his head slightly without looking at him. His fingers brushed a valve, then twisted it just enough to feel the pressure change. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the hum of life returned to one of the smaller turbines. A faint vibration ran through the floor. Evans froze. He had been mocking the old man only moments before, but now his face betrayed disbelief. "What did he just do?" one of the junior sailors whispered, almost to himself. "The lights, they're flickering." Moraro's eyes scanned the panels. Then he asked for a simple tool, a pressure gauge. When it arrived, he attached it to a pipe and read the numbers carefully. His hand moved with precision, like a surgeon handling delicate instruments. "Sir, we can't just—" Shaw began again. But Moraro interrupted, voice calm and firm. "There is no time for waiting," he said. "You want the ship alive? You follow the basics first. Forget the fancy systems. The machine doesn't care about computers. It cares about flow, pressure, valves. You give it what it needs, it will wake up." Ensign Miller watched his grandfather with a mix of awe and relief. This was why he had called him. He had trusted him, and now it was clear that his grandfather's knowledge went far beyond stories of the Enterprise. The kid had never felt so proud and frustrated at the same time that others couldn't see it. Moraro moved to another valve panel hidden under the steel deck. With a small grunt, he lifted the panel and exposed more red-handled valves, thick with dust. The crew watched, silent now. No one laughed, no one whispered. Even Evans seemed unable to speak. He turned each valve slowly, checking the pressure as he went. Hoses hissed, Gauges crept from 0 to low numbers. Slowly, cautiously, the heart of the ship began to beat again. "Holy, it's moving," a young Marine muttered. Mororo didn't respond. His focus was absolute. He traced the flow of the coolant, watching how the turbines reacted. He whispered instructions to himself, as if coaching a machine, reminding it what to do. Evans could feel his frustration and fear collide. He had been sure he was in charge, sure he knew everything about this ship, and now he was powerless, watching an 85-year-old man do what he couldn't even imagine. Captain Riggs' voice came over the intercom again, tense and hurried. "Engineering? Status report? Any progress?" Mororo didn't reply. He didn't need to. The turbines hummed louder, a sound that filled the room with energy. Lights above flickered, then stabilized. Screens remained dark, but the hum of life was enough. Shaw finally swallowed his pride and stepped closer. "Sir, that's impressive. We didn't." He trailed off, embarrassed. "Keep watching," Mororo said quietly. "This is only the beginning." For the next hour, he moved from panel to panel, manually opening bypass valves, rerouting power through older systems that had long been abandoned. The crew began to realize this wasn't guesswork. It was experience, pure, hard-earned knowledge that couldn't be taught in schools or downloaded from manuals. Evans, usually loud and confident, finally said nothing. He simply watched, jaw tight, as Mororo adjusted a final valve and checked a pressure gauge. The turbines now spun steadily, the hum of energy filling the room like a living pulse. "Sir, the secondary systems are online," Shaw said, awe in his voice. Mororo nodded once quietly. "Good. Now the main loop." The crew stepped back instinctively. Everyone knew that restarting the main reactor loop was risky. If anything went wrong, it could cause serious damage. But Mororo moved with a calm certainty that silenced fear itself. Ensign Miller whispered, almost to himself, "Go, Grandpa. You've got this." Mororo knelt, examining a small brass keyhole on an old control panel, almost invisible among modern touchscreens. He pulled a small, worn brass key from his jacket. His fingers, steady and strong, slid it in. With a quarter turn, the main turbine shuddered, then roared to life. The room shook. Lights blazed on. Panels flickered green. The massive engines of the Gerald R Ford came alive, one by one, like giants waking from a long sleep. A cheer erupted from the crew. Relief and astonishment mixed together. Some sailors clapped, others just stared, mouths open. Evans's face drained of color. He looked at the old man, speechless. Mororo didn't turn to face them. His focus remained on the console. To him, this was just work. To everyone else, it was a miracle. The intercom crackled. Captain Riggs' voice was tense but full of disbelief. "Engineering, confirm status. Is the ship responding?" "Yes, sir," Shaw said, almost shaking. "It's stable. Secondary and main loops are online." The room quieted. The emergency lights brightened. Machines hummed with life. The crew, who had been mocking moments ago, now looked like children caught staring at a wizard. Mororo finally stood, slow and careful. He wiped his hands on a rag, ignoring the astonished faces around him. He didn't seek praise. He didn't want it. He had a job, and he had done it. Ensign Miller stepped closer, pride written all over his face. He looked at Evans, who avoided his gaze. "This is the man I told you about," Miller said quietly. "The one who can save this ship. The one who actually knows it." Evans didn't answer. He couldn't. The truth had hit him harder than any reprimand ever could. The quiet hum of life in the engine room was Mororo's reward. It was simple. It was enough. He had brought the ship back from the edge without ceremony, without orders, without fanfare. The crew had witnessed a living legend in action, and for those who could see it, it was a lesson they wouldn't forget. The low hum of the Gerald R. Ford's engines filled the vast engine room. Steam hissed from vents, and the faint smell of hot metal hung in the air. Richard Mororo moved with the same calm precision he had shown for hours, checking valves and gauges, ensuring every system was balanced. The ship was no longer dead, but far from fully operational. Corporal Evans stood stiffly, arms crossed, jaw tight. Every movement of Mororo was a reminder of his own arrogance. He had mocked the old man, doubted him, and now he had nothing to say. Every glance he stole at the brass key in Mororo's hand, every adjustment of the valves made his chest tighten. Shaw hovered behind him, torn between relief and embarrassment. "Sir, we weren't expecting this. It's—" He stopped, shaking his head. "It's incredible." Mororo didn't acknowledge them. His attention was on the machines, the dials, the flow of coolant through pipes. The hum of energy beneath his hands was familiar, comforting even. His grandson, Ensign Miller, watched quietly from the shadows, pride swelling in his chest. He had never doubted his grandfather, but seeing the crew witness it firsthand was another kind of triumph. Suddenly, a deafening clang echoed through the engine room. The main hatch burst open, steel reverberating like a gunshot. Everyone froze. Captain Riggs appeared first, face pale, eyes wide. Flanking him were two Marines in full-dress uniform, rifles at present arms. And then, the figure that made the room go silent. Admiral Thompson. The four-star Admiral stepped into the room with a presence that demanded attention. His boots clicked against the metal floor. His face, carved by years of service, was stern, but his eyes softened immediately when they met Mororo's. It was a recognition born of decades of shared history, unspoken trust, and respect earned in fire and smoke. "Admiral on deck," Commander Shaw stammered. His voice cracked as he and Evans snapped to a panicked attention. The room, which had moments before buzzed with the cautious revival of life, now felt frozen under the weight of authority. Thompson didn't glance at the trembling crew. His eyes locked on Mororo. He approached slowly, every step deliberate, commanding the room without raising his voice. He stopped directly in front of the old man. For a heartbeat, neither spoke. Then, in a move that stunned everyone, Thompson raised his hand and snapped it to his brow in a perfect, sharp salute. It was not just military precision, it was reverence, respect, gratitude carried through decades. "Rick," the Admiral said, his voice booming in the cavernous space, "it is an honor to see you again." Mororo, careful and measured, straightened his back slowly. He wiped grease from his hands onto his worn trousers. He returned the salute not with formal perfection, but with a tired, gentle nod, a greeting between equals. "Jimmy," he said, a faint smile touching his lips, "you've done well for yourself." The Admiral's expression shifted. Respect gave way to a cold fury, sharp and uncompromising. He turned to the crew, his gaze like a laser. Commander Shaw and Corporal Evans felt the weight instantly. "Do you have any idea who this man is?" Thompson's voice boomed. Every echo in the engine room carried authority and rage. "This is Chief Petty Officer Richard Mororo. In 1962, aboard the USS Enterprise, a coolant leak threatened a full reactor meltdown. Every officer on the bridge thought the ship was lost. Every system failed. Every plan in the book was useless." He stepped closer, voice dropping to a menacing growl. "This man, then just 20 years old, refused to let our first nuclear carrier die. He climbed into a service tunnel smaller than a coffin, surrounded by superheated steam, and forced a bypass valve open with nothing but a wrench and determination. He saved the ship. He saved 5,000 lives. The emergency procedures he invented that day, the very manual overrides you are now using, he created them." The silence in the room was absolute. The crew, who had mocked Mororo just hours ago, stared at him in awe. Evans's face paled. He looked at Mororo, unable to speak, trapped by his own shame. Thompson's gaze swept across the room, landing on Commander Shaw. "Your performance today has been a disgrace. You failed to control your team. You failed to recognize genius when it was standing right in front of you." Then the Admiral turned his icy glare on Evans. "And you, Marine. Your behavior was beneath the uniform. Gross disrespect to a civilian guest, a national hero. You will be formally reprimanded." Evans stammered, voice almost a whisper. "Sir, I didn't know." Mororo's voice cut through the tension, calm and gentle. "He's just a kid, Jimmy, full of pride and vinegar. We were all like that once." He turned to Evans, eyes soft. "Son, Respect isn't about age or rank. It's about what you do when the lights go out and alarms are screaming. It's about listening to the quiet voice of experience when everyone else is panicking. Remember that. The room felt lighter, though still heavy with awe. Moraro turned back to the console, continuing his work. The lesson was delivered without anger, but its impact was stronger than any reprimand. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the small brass T-shaped key, edges worn from decades of use. This key was not a medal or decoration. It was trust, responsibility, hands-on knowledge handed down from a captain who had once said, "The heart of this ship is yours now, son." Moraro slid the key into a small hidden keyhole on the dormant console. With a lifetime of experience guiding him, he turned it a quarter rotation. The USS Gerald R roared to life. Not slowly, but violently, magnificently. Lights blazed on. Turbines spun with deafening power. Screens flashed green. Energy pulsed through the ship like a heartbeat. The crew erupted in a spontaneous, unified cheer. Relief and awe were inseparable. Weeks later, under a cloudless sky, the Navy held a ceremony on the flight deck. A new fleet-wide training program, the Moraro Procedure, was established. It focused on manual operation of nuclear reactors, ensuring future sailors would never forget the lessons of the past. Admiral Thompson personally pinned the Navy Distinguished Service Medal on Richard Moraro's chest. It was the highest non-combat decoration, a recognition of a lifetime of service, skill, and courage. Moraro didn't seek glory. He accepted it quietly, almost reluctantly. The crowd clapped, the band played, and cameras captured every moment. But his eyes, calm and thoughtful, were already back on the lessons, the machines, and the quiet satisfaction of a job well done. Weeks had passed since the USS Gerald R was brought back from the brink. The engine room, once a place of chaos and doubt, now hummed steadily under the careful watch of its crew. Richard Moraro had returned to a quieter life, but his influence lingered in every pipe, every valve, and every sailor who had witnessed the miracle firsthand. Corporal Evans walked through the base, a different man from the brash, mocking youth he had been just days ago. His uniform felt heavier, not because of the fabric, but because of the weight of understanding he now carried. He had learned something no training manual could teach: respect for experience, humility in the face of true skill, and the quiet power of knowledge earned over decades. He found himself at a small-town diner near the base, the kind of place sailors like to grab a quick coffee before heading home or on leave. The bell above the door jingled as he entered, and for a moment he didn't see anyone familiar. Then he noticed a figure sitting at the counter, slowly stirring a cup of tea. It was Moraro, wearing a simple jacket, his posture relaxed, calm, and approachable. Evans took a deep breath. He had rehearsed what he might say 100 times, but now, standing in front of the man who had both saved a ship and taught him a lesson in humility, he felt small. He approached quietly, careful not to startle him. "Mr. Moraro, sir," he began, voice low, respectful. I just wanted to say, the coffee is on me." Moraro looked up slowly. His eyes met Evans's, calm and steady, not carrying a hint of the anger or tension that had filled the engine room weeks ago. The faint smile that touched his lips made Evans relax slightly. "Thank you, Corporal," Moraro replied gently. "Sit down. Tell me about yourself." Evans hesitated, then slid onto the stool next to him. He didn't know where to start. He wasn't used to talking without arrogance, without trying to impress, but somehow in the quiet clatter of the diner, he felt safe. They talked for a while, first in short sentences, then in longer stories. Evans shared tales from his training, his experiences at sea, and even his mistakes. Moraro listened, occasionally nodding, occasionally offering a quiet word of advice, never interrupting, never judging. "You know," Moraro said after a pause, "we all start somewhere. You just have to listen when the alarms go off, and when someone who's been there tells you how to handle it, you pay attention." Evans nodded, swallowing hard. I understand that now, sir. I didn't see it before. I thought I knew everything." Moraro chuckled softly, a sound full of warmth and patience. We all think that when we're young. It's not a crime. It's how you learn. The important part is realizing it before it's too late. You did that, son. That counts for something. The conversation drifted to lighter topics. Family, the strange quirks of life at sea, memories of ships long decommissioned. Evans found himself laughing quietly, feeling the bond grow. It was not built on rank or medals, but on shared experience, respect, and the lessons learned in moments when the stakes were highest. Outside, the world continued its usual rhythm. Cars, people, the occasional distant hum of a ship in the harbor. Inside the diner, the noise became a background, a quiet soundtrack to an unexpected friendship forming across generations. Evans looked at Moraro and said, almost sheepishly, I want to be like that, calm under pressure, able to actually fix things when they break, not just yell and panic. Moraro's eyes twinkled. You will be if you keep listening and learning, and you start by respecting the people around you, your team, your ship, the lessons hidden in the machines. Everything else will follow. For the first time in his career, Evans understood that leadership wasn't about authority or swagger. It was about responsibility, patience, and the courage to act when it mattered most. And he had just witnessed it in its purest form. The diner's waitress brought over a fresh cup of coffee, setting it in front of Evans with a smile. On the house, she said, nodding toward Moraro. He's a regular around here. Evans smiled faintly, feeling a sense of humility he had never known before. Thank you, he said again, quieter this time. Moraro lifted his cup in a small, informal toast. To lessons learned the hard way, he said, and to using them well. Evans returned the gesture, silently promising himself that he would. Not for recognition, not for praise, but because he now understood what it meant to take responsibility, not just for machines, but for people, for lives, and for the trust placed in him. Outside the diner, the afternoon sun dipped low over the harbor. Ships moved slowly in the water, oblivious to the quiet victories and lessons being shared in the small diner. Inside, across generations, two men sat side by side, one seasoned by life and the other humbled by experience, sharing coffee, conversation, and understanding. It was simple, it was quiet, but it was enough. Richard Moraro had taught the USS Gerald R to live again. He had taught a young Marine to respect experience. And in that quiet diner, far from the roar of turbines and alarms, he had taught another kind of lesson. That greatness is not in the medals, the rank, or the machinery. It is in the steady hands, the calm mind, and the willingness to act when it matters most. For Evans, the memory of fear, embarrassment, and awe would last a lifetime. For Moraro, the quiet satisfaction of a job done well, once again, was reward enough. And as the sun sank into the horizon, casting long shadows over the harbor, a simple truth hung in the air. Some lessons are timeless, some knowledge irreplaceable, and some people, the truly great ones, leave an impact that echoes far beyond their years.